I had a pretty unconventional childhood. My father was the publisher and friend of Jacques Cousteau, the underwater explorer. And so I grew up listening to the stories of Cousteau's adventures. I remember one day him telling me the very first time they dove into this dark cave with some experimental lighting. They hoped it would improve their ability to film underwater. In the murky depths, sea life had always just appeared as dark and gray silhouettes. But when they turned on the lights, they discovered the most extraordinary colors they had ever seen. I was really young, but I remember feeling just how much that experience had affected him. Not only had they discovered something so beautiful in nature, but they now had the power to share those incredible colors with millions of people. He knew even then how much that could change our perception of the world. And something profound changed within me that day. I think that's when I became an artist. In 2013, I began photographing these installations that I called time shines to document how our planet was changing. I started using these strong symbols about time and choice everywhere I went. I wanted to show what we have, what we're about to lose, and especially what we've already lost. I discovered so many worlds along the way, from the highest peaks of the Himalaya to the depths of our underworld, from the Amazonian rainforest to the great megacities. Everywhere I went, I found the same story. One story.
From the Earth's tallest peaks to the ocean floor, scientists warn no part of the world will be spared from the climate crisis.
That storms are going to sweep the Earth and that we're all going to die of a heat wave. I mean, this is an incredible bad science.
Roughly 1 million species are on the verge of extinction.
Carbon dioxide does not control temperatures or climate on any scale of time.
When I was a kid, I never really thought about whether the world that I knew might be different 20 years down the road. It's during this journey that I realized just how fast the world is changing.
One worst-case prediction sees 1 billion people affected by the year 2050. Drought and famine are forecasted, along with more frequent and destructive storms.
All civilizations become spacefaring or extinct, and we need a plan B.
It became clear I couldn't rely solely on my artistic intuition to understand it. I needed a soundboard. I needed facts. That's when I met Dr. Julie Pullen.
Climate change can manifest in so many different ways across the planet, as you've seen in your travels, as you've chronicled. Like, not everywhere is experiencing rainfall. Not everywhere is at the moment experiencing extreme heat. And so weaving that story together, like, you know what? These are all connected. This is a global pattern with local impacts. It's a really big story to tell.
Throughout my journey, I noticed a kind of pattern emerging. A lot of the people that I encountered were on the front line and already dealing with a changing planet. They were, of course, reacting to it, but more than anything, they were adapting to a new world. It was clear to me I had to share their stories in order to make my art complete. Upper Musang is probably one of the most, if not the most, remote location in the Himalaya. It's very difficult to fly to because the mountains are so high and so close together that it's actually quite dangerous to get there by plane. And it was pretty incredible because you felt like you could actually touch the mountains if you had stuck your hand out the window.
Some of the milestones of change that were associated with the higher latitudes seem to be happening sooner than was projected. You know, some of the most resilient people on the planet are the ones that are experiencing the most acute changes associated with climate change.
Upper Mustang used to always be this isolated kingdom in north of the Himalayas. As a kid, we grew up like playing in the rivers, riding horses, like trying to ride cows and all that. The first visitor arrived in 1992 when it was open for tourism. I remember that somebody had a Polaroid camera and he took photos of us and he gave it to us. And me and my friends were like very already blown away to see this foreign person in the neighborhood. But we were all even more shocked to see all the little things like the Polaroid photos of ourselves and things like this.
Dashi is part of the new youth groups that have started in that region. These youth groups that are trying to preserve their culture and their art. And in the same time, they're trying to develop new opportunities for a new generation to be able to stay there and not leave to go to the cities.
It's actually killer. Look at those guys. We used to ride horses and cows, you know. They're riding bicycles. Ooh, new set of prayer wheels. Look, they're so shiny and bling bling.
Oh wow, they are. They're so bling bling.
Someday I would love to make electricity out of them, you know? Put a little turbine, and then you like shh, and then you can make electricity.
That would be amazing.
It would be street lamps, see?
I'm here because we want to document the evolution of climate here and climate change and climate breakdown in a way. Mm-hmm. And so nobody really believes that that is happening in the Himalayas. It's very hard for people to think, you know, it's cold and there's glaciers and all that.
The glacial sources of water are drying up. And if not drying up, are getting reduced so much that they have not enough water to irrigate their fields, which is their main source of food. It's just a desert everywhere, right? And 2 of these villages that we're going to, the only option is to move elsewhere where there's abundant sources of water. So they're moving right now. If you find it hard to balance, just press your knees onto the...
The glaciers in the Himalaya region represent the primary freshwater source for that whole region. Downstream, it's really creating life for humans. So losing the glaciers is going to transform their lives.
It was very challenging and a little dangerous too, especially if you're not like a good horseback rider like me. You've got these like really deep ditches and your horse is going on this like really thin path and you just shouldn't look down and you just have to trust your horse and just keep on going. And it was like really living, the nomad life and seeing and understanding how they've been living forever.
What moves me a lot, or moves so many people, I'm sure, is that when you see in televisions and news and media that people believe in climate change or not, And the fact that some people think that they can believe in it or not, it's just so striking when you just see it happening right in front of you.
As a Westerner, I had this vision that, the Himalaya and snow and ice and water. I really didn't realize that there was such a drama unfolding. There is so much ancient culture there. And so it's this incredible duality because they're losing their glaciers, but with that, there's such a great risk that they're going to be losing their culture. It was almost immediate that there was no way I could recount the story of the loss without integrating the cultural loss as well. Oh my goodness, oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. The protector gods of Shuzong.
They're so strange, they're so different, no?
All the protector gods are made to look as wrathful as possible,
They will be forced to migrate and they will have to abandon their ancestry. They're literally leaving their gods behind.
It's a big reality. The 2,000 Himalayan glaciers that are feeding around 1.6 billion people on Earth is now like slowly disappearing. And then the fact that there's nothing they can do as a personal measure to solve this. Climate change, weather unpredictability is something of a global concern. We should all act on it because we're all responsible in a way.
It's them today, but it will be everybody else tomorrow. They're just at the front line. And it's also about compassion and deciding who we want to be as a species. Do we want to keep on saying, well, that's really far away and it's never going to happen to us? Or do we feel that these are fellow humans and we need to be compassionate? My installations are about showing you that reality, asking you not to turn your back away from it, and decide what you choose to do because you have a choice.
We don't have time anymore to delay action. One of the extraordinary advances in science has been the ability to simulate the whole Earth system using advances in supercomputing technology. So we can look at how the different components of the Earth system, the air, the water, the land surface, the ice, interact with each other and feed back to each other.
We can already kind of read the future thanks to these supercomputers. Is that possible?
You know, if our emissions continue on a high pathway, then we can see how that plays out for the planet. If our emissions are capped and decline at a certain point, then that's a different trajectory. The ones who are experiencing the most significant changes are those sentinels. They're those societies and civilizations that can help point the way to how to navigate this world in flux.
I mean, I've really seen this with the Shipibo tribes that are in the Peruvian Amazon. They're by culture and by nature, they're earth protectors.
Esa es espina, cuidado.
Es la supervivencia, la macheta.
Para supervivencia y para cualquier defensa que nos puede atacar los animales silvestres.
¿Eso qué es?
Este es su guairuro macho, lo que dicen. Según dice que esto es suerte, su collar de guairuro.
Ah, es suerte.
Que da suerte.
Ah, ok.
Sí.
Es muy bonito.
Sí.
Gracias. Para la instalación es perfecto esto.
Ajá.
Sometimes it's a cultural object, sometimes it's organic. There's a search, there's a quest. There's definitely a process in what I do. I arrive on location and I need to connect to the location and understand the place better, you know, its challenges, the people, their challenges, their history. And every time it's a learning process because I'm trying to put together a symbolic representation of that place.
Álvaros están un poquito en peligro.
Claro que sí, porque los bosques primarios son árboles inmensos, grandes, que nadie ha deforestado, nadie ha talado. Hoy en día, ya cerca a la ciudad, ya no le vemos ya los árboles grandes, bosques primarios, ya no existen. Y por el aumento de la población siguen talando a querer terminar nuestros recursos que tenemos.
Jared is a forest protector by tradition because the Shipibo tribe is a tribe that has always protected the forest. And he has also become a park ranger. And he's become a modern forest protector as well.
Yo me llamo, mi nombre Shipibo es Ushamundi. Significa un hombre fuerte y amable. Me puse preocupante, me agarran las preocupaciones que Que ya no va a haber más guardianes como yo, y porque los árboles están ahí parados, crecen solos, años de años duran, miles de años, y no tienen defensas con qué defender ellos, ¿no? Mi kushi, mi energía,
Animondo medicina
Jared is obviously protecting what they call the spirit trees because they're so ancient and they're so huge and therefore they have this value because that's like the ultimate luxury is to be able to cut them and use them for something else. This tree has so many creatures living in it, so all these little spiders came over and started walking around in the installation, and then of course, then I put in my symbols, you know.
Este es símbolo de muerte.
No, esto es vida.
Vida. Ah.
De opciones de la vida. Tra una vida positiva o una vida negativa, ¿no? Sí.
And so there's like these red flowers, these beautiful red flowers that, you know, in our world, in our Western world, is like something that is so luxurious and so rare to find. You only find them in certain florists, and they're everywhere. And at the beginning, I was like, there's no way I can cut these flowers because they're just, for me, they were just such an incredible, luxurious experience. And then that's when the shipibos told me that's not a problem. You need to cut them because like that, it will just regenerate faster.
We're gonna have to send the drone to the part that is deforested so we can see if there's no one dangerous in there, so it's safe for us.
So we just send a drone, and if nobody's there, then we can go?
We can get in, yeah.
Okay, perfect,
Okay.
great.
De frente. Habla de frente.
Forest is being destroyed at an alarming rate. Destructive fires tore through massive sections of the Amazon rainforest last summer. And even before that, it had lost 20% of its landmass to deforestation in the last 4 decades.
Logging is a lucrative industry in Peru, and timber from the rainforest has become a key export.
The vast majority is caused by small-scale loggers or farmers, many of whom cut down forest to grow coca for the black market.
¿Cuánto hectáreas?
Esta es la deforestación aproximadamente de 5 hectáreas.
Ah, es increíble.
Sí.
¿En cuánto tiempo? ¿Cuánto tiempo? Parece?
Este chakra deforestado tiene casi como un mes, un aproximado.
¿Un mes?
Un mes de lo que han tumbado, claro.
This is the other facet of the Amazon. I mean, it's the deforestation. So this image is you know, what I had to do. I mean, the other one is what I wanted to do, and this one is what I had to do.
Nosotros somos 14 guardaparques, pero con 1.354.485.10 hectáreas, que abarca el área protegida. Y es bastante peligroso por temas, trabajos ilícitos que existen ahí en cada zona del área protegida. Primero le talan los árboles para luego quemarle. a incendiarle para que quede libre y luego le plantan ya los plantones de coca.
Estos. It's like walking in a cemetery. If you're coming from that life and from that vitality and you end up here, it's not even like a burial ground, it's just a dead zone.
Y hemos pasado casos ya con los pueblos shipibo-conibo que han sido asesinados por temas de cocaleros, los narcotráficos. Ha sucedido, ha pasado las cosas ya. Bueno, arma, pistola no está permitido. Y de esa manera nosotros corremos riesgo porque no tenemos con qué defendernos.
I think now if he gets the palms to put on the sides to it.
What I saw there was, it was a forest under attack. The entire jungle is completely under attack. It's like a war zone.
It's, you know, we have this sense of the Amazon as being infinite, you know, with this infinite capacity to regenerate itself. But all of the incursions and the threats that it's faced with that you're mapping in your work are really devastating and really profound, and they really compromise the ability of the Amazon to renew and to refresh and to regenerate itself.
Y en los grandes países muchas contaminaciones y nosotros estamos como amortiguador de esos contaminantes. Cada uno con sus países, los gobiernos son llamados para proteger los bosques que tenemos.
Report from the UK's Met Office, these scientists warn that if the planet increases by 3 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels by the end of this century, there could be fires of the kind we're seeing in Australia in many other places.
Scientists say the fires across Siberia, fueled by abnormally high temperatures, are contributing to global warming.
Russia has 1/5 of the world's forests. If they're burning, the fallout is global.
When I arrived in Baikal, there was already a drought. So that's another thing that blew my mind, is that there's droughts in Siberia. A few days into our trip, these huge fires exploded, and they were so strong that they actually affected the climate.
It still smells like burning.
I had to create an installation, and there was nothing optimistic about it. There were a few little yellow flowers that were growing around, but I just couldn't put them on the installation. There was nothing positive or good or hopeful about that forest.
Environmentalists now fear it's reaching a tipping point.
Everybody's talking about tipping points these days. Can you really tell me what this is about?
The idea of a tipping point is that once these thresholds are crossed, we expect there to be cascading effects and feedback loops that will drive even more accelerated change. With the fires in Siberia, creating this warming and accelerated melting of the permafrost. It's this accelerated cycle of warming, and then the ice just can't take hold anymore.
I mean, we're going through the worst fires in the US ever, or in Siberia, or even in the Amazon. Are those like feedback loops of the tipping points? Is that the consequence of the consequence?
They are. Well, they lead to really significant, profound land surface changes. So all of these things sort of cascade on themselves.
What did you feel when you came here after 2 years?
This is one of my first experiences of a great forest being burnt, you know? A burnt forest, an anthropogenically burnt forest was here, and that's something I'll never forget.
It feels like you can shoot a horror movie here. And it is one of the most famous and one of the most beautiful places around Baikal. Years ago, it was completely different. It all was evergreen. And that it happens because of us. Of course, a forest fire is something very natural, and it happens just because of a thunderstorm, whatever. But now it happens like hundreds times more frequently.
While I was doing my exhibition in Moscow, I decided to go to Siberia. I'd always wanted to go there, and it was one of those places that had always fascinated me, and especially like Baikal. We got in touch with some activists who are in Siberia and who agreed to welcome me and take me around and start giving me a sense of Lake Baikal, and Dasha was one of those people.
Most of us living here, we define ourselves not that much as Russians, but as Siberians.
All the activists told me you have to come back in the winter. You can't understand Baikal if you haven't also seen the winter season. And they were right.
About Baikal, I would say that it's not only the main water resource for the planet, it's also the great energetic resource. I always put my hands in and say like, hello, father, like in this big meaning, yeah. And it actually helps. It shouldn't be like, let's not touch the nature. Let's touch the nature, but in a smart way. So we actually conserve that. And sometimes people do something bad for the nature, not because they don't care, it's because they haven't thought about that. And when you actually explain, when you actually give the message, you change the world like with a very, very slight movements.
At the end, I put the little wild herbs around it. Smell this one. I love it.
Around the world, stronger storms and more intense droughts will create humanitarian crises and risk more conflict.
Climate change has the potential to exacerbate many of the challenges the world already confronts.
For instance, it can intensify competition over natural resources, drive up food prices, and increase geopolitical tensions.
governments recognize that they need to factor in the risks associated with climate change and alter their operations accordingly.
So are you saying to me that all the navies around the planet are already adapting to climate change?
Well, they will have to be resilient, yeah. So fresh water will be in short supply in the future. It already is in some regions of the world. This is going to be one of the most, if not the most valuable resources on the planet.
As water becomes scarcer, people get more aggressive in protecting their water rights. In fact, the fight over who gets to use the world's water has been a long, ongoing battle.
This lake is over 30 million years old. It's the most old lake in the world, the most big and the purest.
They say that with the water of Baikal, you could give water, drinking water, to the entire planet for at least over a year.
Only last maybe a couple of years, locals start to realize what they have. Because more and more we can see in media and news and people suffering without just water. With water just gone. Our small movement become huge for all of us. So yeah, of course, we start to appreciate the clean water. We start to fight for clean water. We start to scream like this, we need to save Lake Baikal. A lot of people become an activist, even like making a post on Instagram or Facebook or something. Maybe it's a first step to do more. I'm drinking water from the Lake Baikal. This is Lake Baikal water directly from the lake. And I want my sons to do the same. So it's really important for me.
Could it become a militarized zone? I mean, could this become blue gold? Could it be that people will not want to share it?
So there is research that suggests that conflicts are instigated and magnified by resource constrictions, and that water will be a flashpoint. I have some climate science colleagues that say they're less worried about the changes that the planet is undergoing, and they're most worried about the changes that it could bring out in people.
As you see today, in the Himalayas, countries are already fighting over glaciers. I think we all need to understand that the solution to this is not trying to have bigger controls on supply of natural resources, but learning how to use it controllably and ethically, you know. These are the fields of the 15 houses of Samjong, right? And since this year, they have abandoned all the fields. All the fields you see around, they've been abandoned.
So this village has been here for over 1,000 years, and now it's going to have to move because of lack of water. Is that correct?
And that's a result of the glaciers drying, which is a result of the earth that is warming due to things that we're doing, so.
And this is happening all over the Himalaya.
Totally. The people of Samjong are one of the first climate refugees in all of the Himalayas. It's a reality that they're forced to undertake. You know, so for them, it's just absolutely forced migration, brought about by a problem they don't know why or how to solve. So it's a global crisis.
Very nice.
They've been able to rely on the seasonal water cycle of the planet for generations. And it's treated them well.
Yeah, until now.
Until now.
Yeah. And they have almost no impact on our planet. They burn cow dung to heat themselves. This historical millennial village is disappearing. How does that make you feel?
I just also feel like somehow we are all to share the blame. And like these people the least, because they're the least contributors but the most affected, so but they're on the edge, so they have to leave.
What's the biggest problem? Overpopulation or living sustainably?
So you take that area, Nepal, you compare that with an area like New York City that has like magnitudes more consumption than the whole of Nepal, which has just like a fraction of that.
What do you mean an entire country like Nepal has a lower consumption footprint than Manhattan?
Massive disparities in consumption patterns between different regions.
The outside is butter and the red is...
You know, this concept of Earth Overshoot Day. So midway through the year, we've consumed what we could sustainably manage to consume for the whole year in order to live and allow it to regenerate. In the global north, we often are told that we have unlimited, boundless resources. Is that really a message that we want to be giving and receiving?
I think they understood why I was there. And they wanted to make sure that I was able to transmit who they were and what they are. And I think that these carved mantras is probably one of the strongest things.
It's carved with these mantras. So that's a very strong symbol for warding off evil spirits and praying for victory to the gods. So.
And they told me it was okay for me to use them for my installation. And that was something that really blew my mind, because in my religion, you don't touch anything that's sacred and you can't really share it, and you have to just look at it and honor it.
Here you go. Time is ticking. Yeah.
Time is ticking. All those carved mantras are going to stay in Samsung, and they're going to leave.
I think that the crisis that Samsung is facing now is something that each of us are somehow responsible for. Sooner or later, that everyone else will have to go through what Samsung is going through today.
More than 1 billion people could be displaced by the year 2050, according to a new analysis of global ecological threats.
Those areas are expected to expand across 1/5 of the planet in the next half-century.
So one of the areas that has projected strongest migration patterns is North Africa. And so the loss of water and a water supply will drive many people to leave that region.
I met quite a few refugees, both in Lampedusa and North Africa. They're anonymous mostly. I can't even say where I was in North Africa because we weren't there legally.
Donc nous, on a continué. On était épuisés, fatigués, mais on continuait quand même.
It's deadly, but you don't have choice. You have to reach the destination you are thinking.
The other impacts of climate change is global migration like we've never seen before. It's going to require us to rethink how we think about what security, safety, human rights are in an environment where so many people are displaced.
I started going to Lampedusa almost right at the beginning of my project because the European island is the closest to North Africa, and that's where a lot of people arrive. This was before the refugee crisis started. Every year it just got worse.
In a desert or something like that, there is no policeman, there is no rule. Human being and the chicken is the same for them.
Molu ka penke man ka kono tai ka umpole nka kono ta mololu.
On souffre, tout le monde. Surtout les femmes souffrent beaucoup. Ce qui m'a choqué, bon, c'est le viol que j'ai eu avec cet enfant-là.
Et comment il s'appelle?
Il n'a pas un nom pour le moment. Je n'ai pas un nom pour lui. Je ne sais pas. On est là comme ça. Je l'aime. Il est innocent.
Questa è Lampedusa, giusto? Sì. Ecco, questa io l'avevo portata a Bruxelles, continuavano a dire no, non va bene, non mi piace, ma poi non sanno neanche spiegarti bene perché non va bene, cioè se vuol dire non va bene a Bruxelles nessuno aveva voglia di parlare dei profughi, quindi nessuno vuole vedere un problema, questa è la verità.
Sì, però cioè, questo è il scopo del mio lavoro, che anche se sono delle composizioni estremamente artistiche, c'è anche un lato documentativo, questo è quello che ho trovato lì e questo è quello che ho visto lì.
Non c'è la volontà di capire e neanche di valutare l'immagine, perché l'immagine corrisponde a qualcosa che non piace.
Art in all its forms right now has an extra duty, like a civic duty, to remind us of who we are, where we belong, and what our roots are, and what we've been able to achieve, and therefore what we can still achieve. And art can do that.
Most of the time, our eyes stop at the first layer of the ocean, and already that one is able to make us dream.
Hello, being in the bottom of the sea.
But there is so much more beneath that layer. Imagine that 80% of all living species live in the marine environment, and the ocean actually covers 71% of the Earth's surface. So our planet that is called planet Earth should be called planet Ocean. Those dolphins, those animals, those marine creatures can be really catalysts for change. But this is the most important lessons that we should learn from aquarium.
Maria Sole and I met at the United Nations. I was a speaker for World Oceans Day, and she was the moderator. She's a marine biologist in Italy.
In the context of climate change, it's going to require us to do things really differently.
How does it make you feel, personally, to see the state of the ocean?
Witnessing the state of the ocean and knowing what I cannot see with my eyes makes me sad. I am responsible as an individual, as a citizen, as a marine biologist, as someone that works in marine conservation, to talk about these issues, to make people aware that something major is happening, but we still have time to turn the tide.
Oceans are stressed at levels they have rarely been before, and it could have grave consequences for all of us. dying coral reefs and chemical pollution. Scientists say some of these changes are happening faster than predicted.
Abundance of plastics filling the oceans and land, and in places on Earth that even humans don't occupy.
And the combination of these stresses could lead us to a mass extinction of multiple marine species.
Every year, about 8 to 10 million tons of plastic enter the ocean, and it does this through rivers. 95% of all the plastic that enter the ocean sink after 5 months. Somewhere that is like yet to be explored by us is already touched by us through plastic pollution.
I was diving and suddenly like this current came through and I saw all these jellyfish. I started to try and avoid them, and then one of them touched me, and I like backed off, and it wasn't jellyfish, it was like a piece of plastic.
Those species also absorb external chemicals that are already in the ocean, like pesticide, for example, but also all the odors and smells that you can find in the ocean. What happened is that for fish and other marine creatures, plastic look like food and smell like food.
It was basically this piece of pink plastic, and it was exactly the same pink as the jellyfish. And I tied this tiny miniature hourglass around the piece of plastic. And then I took my smallest vanity, my smallest skull, and I kind of wrapped that around the other part of the piece of plastic, and then suddenly it just looked like this scary mermaid.
Hundreds of marine mammals die every year because they have been eating plastic.
This pilot whale is stranded, starving to death. It cannot eat because its stomach is full of plastic.
Human race, humankind, in the whole world, we drink over 1 million plastic bottles every minute. And just 8% get correctly recycled. The plastic production is foreseen to increase by 40% in the next decade. So I think that we need still to work a lot in order to change our behavior and approach to something, a material that is made to last forever.
This is when the time shrine is just disappearing, because now we're entering into this new anthropogenic moment of what our oceans look like now. I have to find a different type of message. I have to show you something different. I have to show you what our planet is becoming. I have to show you how much it's changed. People are still discussing in the global north whether we're going through the Anthropocene or not, and so many people don't even know what it means.
Right. So it's this period of time of rapid change in the environmental conditions.
I started discovering the destruction by going to these locations. I wasn't expecting it.
It was a little bit the other way around. It was really like going to these locations, hoping to create beautiful installations, and realizing that I couldn't, because what I was finding there was trash. If I didn't know about it, probably most people didn't either.
So humans are the dominant drivers in this new era that we're in. And so that touches all kinds of things, the ways that we're modifying our environment, the way that we're consuming, the way that we're disposing of things. The largest emissions introduced into the atmosphere happened over the last 50 years. I mean, that's such a compressed time frame of change. And these poor species, I mean, how do they keep up? Like, how could they possibly keep up with that?
And then there was this shift in my mind, in my spirit, about what our legacy was going to be about. Was our archaeology going to be trash? Is that what our civilization is? Are we going to be remembered for trash?
All the plastic that was ever produced still exists because it just breaks down into smaller pieces, but it stays. It does not biodegrade. And when it breaks down into pieces that are smaller than 5 millimeters, it's called microplastic. And recent studies prove that basically we ingest 5 grams of plastic each week, which is the equivalent of a credit card every week.
E siamo andati in Norvegia, siamo andati appunto in Patagonia, siamo andati su un ghiacciaio vicino a Santiago del Cile.
Anche nel Mount Kenya.
Siamo andati sul Mount Kenya. Sì, questa qui è proprio l'ultima spedizione che abbiamo fatto, è quella del Mount Kenya.
I met Roberto Ambrosini through Maria Sore because they both are studying microplastics, her in the ocean and him in glaciers. And this is where the voice of science is important and where collaboration between different specialties, whether it's like through art or through science or, you know, through engineering or whatever, we all have to come together to talk about these things.
La prima dimostrazione scientifica e l'unica finora della presenza di contaminazione microplastica in un ambiente glaciale è il lavoro che abbiamo fatto noi sul ghiacciaio dei Forni. Se vuoi capire qual è la dispersione dei contaminanti in giro, andare a cercare nei ghiacciai è il posto giusto.
Ma
perché
la
lì trovi...
contaminazione da plastica è aerea praticamente.
Eh sì, sui ghiacciai arriva prevalentemente per via aerea, cioè dalla plastica che viene trasportata dalle città, dagli ambienti di fondovalle che arriva sui ghiacciai.
Quindi questa è già una bella selezione. Immaginati a valle, nelle nostre città, in qualsiasi
Nelle nostre
altra
città
parte.
ce ne sono molti di più.
Quindi noi praticamente respiriamo microplastica ogni giorno.
Sì, ogni giorno.
Microplastic particles have been revealed in the placentas of unborn babies for the first time. The particles are likely to have been consumed or breathed in by the mother.
We need time to find the solutions. And the problem is that we're running out of time. Glaciers are like these extreme environments. And so within extreme environments exist bacteria and microbes and a whole world of elements that don't exist anywhere else and perhaps have the strength of, for example, eating the microplastic or destroying it. But they're disappearing. They're melting. And we have to cover them up with these intelligent materials. Not to prevent them from melting, but only to slow it down. Can we still talk about mitigation, or are we just already in full-blown adaptation and that's just the way it's going to be?
The reality is we need it all, right? We need to be doing mitigation. We need to reduce our emissions. We need to be drawing down our emissions at the same time that we're rapidly adapting. The scale of the challenges is so immense that it's going to take all of our systems adapting to sustain our life, and not just for humans, but to sustain life for all the range of different creatures on the planet.
But there are a range of different ways to address adaptation, which from barriers, from walls, which are very strong interventions, to more passive interventions, like more terrace structures that allow the water to flow and then recede, but still provide some protection.
この施設は地域が浸水被害を守るということで作られた施設になります。で、概要といたしましては、この周辺の小さな川が溢れそうになった時に川の水を取り込んで大きな川、江戸川へと排水することで地域の安全と安心を守る、そういった施設になります。
That was really important for me to discover that concept, the fact that we were geologically affecting our planet. And it was the first time in the history of our planet. And the fact that we were a geological force, that was something that really pushed me in my project even more. Because obviously, if we were being a negative geological force, we could also become a positive geological force.
Lo que yo trabajo con jóvenes por escalar es el monitoreo de caracol, langosta, tortugas, pez león y arrecifes.
De vista, tiene que seguir viendo la foto. Sí. Hemos agarrado también una tortuga con un cordel muy enredada y la liberamos. Nosotros somos un ejemplo de la conservación de las especies en peligro de extinción.
Jóvenes por Escalar is a great example of community science.
Estamos midiendo, sacando muestras de sangre, puede ser analizada.
And they are bringing all this data to the scientific platform, and it's real data because they have the local knowledge of the places where they can do this monitoring.
¿Cuál es el futuro? Me encantaría que se conservara así como tenemos ahorita nuestro arrecife, muy bonito. Yo soy una de las personas que están cuidando de la naturaleza.
Nosotros como jóvenes por escalar tenemos que conservar nuestro planeta, tenemos que dejarle a los hijos una muy bonita enseñanza de cuidar nuestro planeta, porque solo tenemos un planeta, no tenemos más.
Cuenta los objetos que hay en cada uno.
Al igual como monitoreamos, hemos dado difusión a las escuelas y les damos a conocer la importancia, ¿no?, del medio ambiente y que tenemos que cuidarlo.
Como mamá, le enseño a mis hijas a cuidar mucho de nuestras especies, porque las conozco yo y quiero que sigan reproduciéndose esas especies para que mis hijas conozcan y los hijos de mis hijos sigan conociendo.
Normally we think that we go to the communities and teach them something, and now there's a community going out of the community and teach the youth in the city what is happening in terms of conservation at the local level.
But you were a jovenes yourself. I mean, this is where you started, so this is you 10 years later.
I started here when I was 18 years old as an environmental educator. Well, my work at the United Nations is represent international non-governmental organization. I'm there to raise the voice of the community and to bring the voice of the communities, to bring the reality of what's happening in the ground to the global vision.
What surprised me about Lily was her determination. She's from a very young age had to deal herself with people coming in and drug dealers because, you know, Mexico has its issues, and she was confronted to a very rough reality.
Yeah, negotiations can be tough, it can be frustrated, but we are there with a purpose. And yeah, I'm thinking about Ishkalag makes me or helps me to keep up and know that we are looking for solutions. But Ishkalag absolutely made me belong to this planet, belong to this earth. I'm amazed about its beauty, but also about the fragility and the social situation. Coming back and see that amount of sarcasm, that was really shocking. That tells you that something is wrong, something is happening.
You know, that's what shocked me the most when we arrived in Ishkanak, is that we actually smelt the sargassum seaweed before we actually saw it. And then you get to the beach, and it's just everywhere. There's no white sand.
Sargassum is a natural ecosystem floating in the water, and it actually has its own endemic species on it. But having a lot of it is really causing problems. It is definitely something changing in the environment, something changing in the ocean. So the activities that we do on land affect the ocean. The nutrients come in the water system, the river system, all this irrigates to the ocean, and it affects.
El sargazo nos está afectando tanto en la economía, en las mujeres, porque al igual trabajamos con turismo, porque al igual genera mal olor. Al igual en el hogar, a nosotras las mujeres se nos echan a perder nuestras cosas.
This was an incredible collaboration. I'd never done such a big collaboration with so many people. They're these incredible ocean protectors, this new generation of kids. In their office was this huge whalebone, like humongous. And I was like, oh my gosh, can we use that to create the installation? And they were like, jumped up, yes, of course, just kind of carried it out and helped me create this installation. So this was a real collaboration with them. Obviously, I could have never gotten that whalebone where it was without their help.
Probably my big worry is that we ignore things. If we keep thinking that nothing is happening, we're not going to be able to do anything. We ignore the fact that things are changing. So if we live in ignorance, we are not going to make a difference. We're not going to make it work. That's my big worry.
Los límites solo tú te los pones, nadie más te los va a poner. Y cuando amas realmente lo que te gusta, puedes descubrir que ahí no hay solo una cosa por hacer, hay muchísimas por hacer.
And this is one of those places that really made me want to go beyond the installation and tell the stories of who was behind the installation, of the backstage of the installation, of what I'd learned and who I'd met. As you can see, Mimi and Panchita are
excellent, incredible examples of why 50% of humanity is key for the world of tomorrow and for the protection of the oceans. The sargassum seaweed has tripled from last year. As much as they're courageous and are doing locally everything that they should and can do to survive, are very much aware of how fast the environment is changing and how much their survival depends on global change.
Vado molto profondo nel mare a vedere quello che sta succedendo lì. Sapete cosa ho trovato?
Ho cominciato a vedere i veri cambiamenti che stanno succedendo già nel mondo.
We actually are physically changing the planet. We have that power. We will have to choose what we want to keep and what we are ready to let go of.
So that was another really interesting moment when so teachers and professors started coming to my shows and asking me if they could come back with their students. And I had never anticipated that.
We can choose between a positive and constructive life or a negative and superficial life.
I realized that my art, in a way, had a voice.
La question, qu'est-ce que c'est la question? Est-ce qu'on peut vivre sur une planète où il y a encore des léopards des neiges? Oggi le Nazioni Unite dicono che entro il 2050 ci sarà una media.
And that children and youth really got it.
What can we do to help?
We can all fix something, even if it's something very small, and make it beautiful again.
Does anybody have a last question before we show the last film?
I think that your project is cool because, you know, save the planet and yeah, it's awesome. But I think that you're not giving like a real, you know, tips to how to save it, because it's your generation and the generation above you that, you know, destroy our planet in a way. So yeah, you can teach us to save our planet, but actually we can't do, because we are teens, I think, and the politician can do something, but I don't think that they care so much in the end.
What happened is that I saw the youth evolve. The first years, they would listen to me graciously, and then little by little, I started getting pushback.
People ask me what I want to do when I grow up, and my question is, why do I have to grow up to be somebody?
You say you love your children above all else, and yet you're stealing their future in front of their very eyes.
Greta Thunberg is a young woman from Sweden who has decided to make it her life's mission to save the world from climate change.
C'est dommage parce que c'est à nous de changer le monde, c'est nous qui voulons changer le monde. Et pour l'instant, personne ne vote, il n'y a que les vieux qui votent.
Millions of people around the world today are gathering for climate strike. The demonstrations are being held with activist Greta Thunberg's Friday for a Future movement, which invites young people to stage school strikes for the climate.
When Greta Thunberg and the youth movement started, I was really not surprised because I had already started seeing those reactions for over a year in my educational projects. I met Alexandria in New York when she was 13 years old, and that was right at the beginning of the Friday for the Future movement. She's that generation that belongs to the Anthropocene, where these children are taking on to their shoulder these responsibilities and these challenges and these worries for their future.
Sitting at this bench is very cold. I've been school striking in wind, rain, sleet, snow, and I've even striked in the polar vortex in a sub-zero sleeping bag. Some people have geotagged at Alexandria's bench. Sitting at this bench has turned myself into an activist where I'm constantly working now to have a future to get climate action. My family has always been really connected with nature. So when I was younger, we'd go on family road trips to the beach, and there would be the specific beach, Pebble Beach, in Northern California that we would always go to, and it would be really fun because I'd get to bury my dad in the pebbles, and they'd bury me in the pebbles. Pebble Beach is disappearing because with sea level rises, the water is getting higher to the point where the beach may no longer exist anymore. And with the beach disappearing, it's like a part of myself disappearing. Having that love for California and wanting to protect where you're from, it really makes me feel more encouraged to stay going.
No, CO2 emissions are not actually harmful to the planet. I hate to see so many young people especially panicking about climate change.
The climate hysteria movement is not about science. If it were about science, it would be led by scientists rather than by politicians and a mentally ill Swedish child who is being exploited by her parents.
I think when people write articles about that, sadly, it's a good sign, because that means that they're really threatened by our beliefs and how we're really making a difference, to the point where we're threatening what they've thought for so long.
Right.
And so the way they fight back is trying to cyberbully us, and we're trying to save them as well, and their children and their grandchildren, the people who are the climate deniers. We're saving them.
Do you feel that what you're getting out of what you're doing now as an activist is something you would not have gotten from school?
I definitely think the educational system is something that'll have to change, because we aren't being taught the crisis we're in. We're not being told the truth. A lot of the time we're being taught about how to live in the same world we're in, how to be the same consumers. That's what we have to learn on ourselves and have to push back and teach ourselves, which isn't fair.
I think that in the environmental movement, there was a before and an after Fridays for the Future, for sure. They, within a couple months, were able to start communicating and get through messages that I certainly, or a lot of us, had never been able to get through. But it doesn't take away the fact that Alexandria never had a little girl's life. And that is because of what the generations before them did. And that is extremely unfair.
The system is broken and it needs to change. That's what all of the activists are calling for. We're calling for system change and not climate change. Failure is not an option for us because this is our future, and we're going to make sure that we have a livable planet.
It's so striking because in the cities we are so disconnected from nature, but yet we are the ones that are and will be affecting the natural world. You know, technology and wealth have never rated this high, and yet we've probably never faced such an uncertain future as right now.
It suggests that there's more to be done to channel the technology toward where our sustainability challenges are right now, like in this moment. Are there ways to align the incentives of innovation to be focused more on climate solutions? And there's this whole area of climate tech, which is focused on that. Like, how do we rapidly innovate in the energy space, and the climate solution space, and the agriculture space?
Can you hear me? Yes. Yes, I can. This looks like a science fiction movie. We are looking at the first ever experimental underwater farm in the world. Is that basil? It looks so healthy. It even looks happy. I mean, look at it. Can you imagine how many people we could feed. Completely self-sufficient. We're swimming in the future.
Technology is a tool. It's like a knife, you know, you can use it to share a piece of cake or you can use it to kill. So it's up to us. The tool is there. It's up to us how we want to use it.
Is that going to happen all over the planet, or is this just going to be for the global north?
The hope is that they'll also be able to share both that knowledge and those resources, so we do have more of an equitable allocation. Because our ability to take action is going to be different than the people's ability to take action in these other places that you've been visiting. And we can learn from them, and they can learn from us. And it's not a one-way street. This is a mutual engagement, if we choose it.
Al mundo que te vas a salir, bueno.
Aquí vivían mis antepasados abuelos y así hemos venido a crecer nuestras generaciones tras generaciones.
These are communities that are a barrier between full-blown economic exploitation of the Amazon and the nature. So they are the last frontier. And you see how little technology they have, considering how much more they need, and there's absolutely no investment made by the government.
Para nosotros es un apoyo las nuevas tecnologías que están saliendo ahora. Drone, y para ver, elevamos y vemos qué hay y qué no hay, para poder también controlar un poco de peligro.
Wouldn't that be incredible? Like to co-evolve with the technology to really bring it to bear on the issues that are the most pressing for our civilization and society.
Is co-evolution an option with a positive? It sounds so positive.
Absolutely.
Yo creo que las tradiciones y con la tecnología sí se pueden vivir, unir, para que cuando se unen esas tradiciones y la tecnología, se forman un conocimiento más alto.
We came back down from Kashiboya, and next thing we knew, coronavirus had hit all of Europe and the United States.
Se recuerda la necesidad de encontrarse en su puerta de embarque a la hora establecida.
We barely made it out of Lima because there were normal flights. So there's always a cultural shock once you come back from a place like the Amazon, but then it was like then the world had completely changed overnight.
We can't go back. This is something incredibly nonlinear that has just happened. And the ripple effects are enormous, they're incredible. Everything has just been shifted forward. You know, we have this thing, we call it climate vision, when you can look ahead and see what those impacts will be. But now we're feeling those impacts and these waves that are like crashing on top of each other.
Yo he estado postrado en la cama casi como un mes y medio, casi 2 meses.
Entonces, hay muchos casos de COVID en la comunidad.
Miles, cientos de indígenas han fallecido por el tema de coronavirus.
Cosa ne piensa de esta situación con el gobierno?
Como si fuera a decir, que se vean ellos o que se mueran, algo así nos ha sentido apartado del gobierno. Nosotros no nos dan importancia mucho, más le dan importancia a los que están en la ciudad.
And as the climate change impacts accelerate and expand, I suspect we're going to see more of these types of compounding, cascading tipping points.
It's like a boot camp of what could potentially happen in the Anthropocene, right?
That's a big transition point for us. So there's important lessons to learn from this, how to keep each other safe. What does security mean? How do we love each other through crises?
La terza dobbiamo mettere in alto sopra le scalette, non più pannelli.
Io sono a 41.
Going and creating art in places that are so challenging and so difficult, and meeting earth protectors that have to deal with difficulties and societal issues, and then coming back to a world of beauty and sophistication and wealth never bothered me at all. My art had the purpose of bringing back these stories and sharing them, but also the fact that by selling the art, I was also contributing to help these communities through my foundation.
So many systems have flaws, you know. I think the best approach would be, rather than being outside the system, to try to push that thing through the system, and I would love to be a part of it.
Do you believe that that's going to happen? I mean, do you actually really believe in the future?
There are so many things that will prevent us from believing that it will happen, but I think the approach is to believe, you know. For me, personally, it would be, even if it never happens in my entire lifetime, I would tell my children that it will happen.
Definitely, the art takes its whole meaning once it's in an exhibition and it's seen and it can touch people from a completely different reality. That's what empowers it. That's what makes it purposeful. It can be shared and seen by people who could never else relate to any of those realities.
We had seen things that could change. But in that race of awareness, are we bringing solutions? Are we bringing tangible solutions that are going to help the people that are in the front line?
«Одна планета. Общее будущее» – проект, который представляет Московский музей современного искусства. Он посвящен проблемам
When I think of us as mankind, I feel that at the same time we are very, very small and silly, like compared with nature. On the other side, we are very, very strong. Each small person can make huge difference.
You know, I don't exactly know what people are going to do, but I think the crisis, it's getting so urgent that people will start thinking of ways that the youth aren't thinking of, in ways where they do become violent. there's still more room for civil disobedience because now is the time to do direct action.
In order to survive as a species, we need to step back a little bit and talk about also regeneration. We have changed the very essence of the ocean in the past 50 years. Now it's time to give back.
I think I'm just the tip of the iceberg. I think there's an entire generation of artists arriving after me who will take on that role in extraordinary ways that I have not even been able to imagine. But if in my generation, we don't create the installations and the time shrines and we don't put them in front of nature, what's going to happen to the next generation of artists? What are they going to have to photograph?